Welcome back to Now Let's Be Honest. I'm David Tate, and over the last several months, we have looked at every single scene and every single episode of The Chosen Season 5, and we've talked about what's biblical, what's probable, what's improbable, what's ahistorical, what's fictional, and if you want to go check out those videos, you can go do that, and I would encourage you to do so. What we're going to do in this video, though, is I'm going to pull out my handy-dandy Excel spreadsheet, and we're just going to update it and figure out what was actually included in the show. Prior to each season of the show, I basically pull out this spreadsheet, which is a gospel harmony, where it just basically takes Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John and all the events in Jesus' life, and it compiles them together, and I predict what I think we're going to see depicted in the show. And so now that the season is over, I just want to go back through and see whether or not my predictions were correct, and then in a separate video that's going to come out shortly after this, I'm also going to predict what I expect to see in Season 6, so that then after Season 6, we can go and see whether or not that was accurate as well. And so, as we go through this, I just want to encourage you to maybe go down in the comments and let me know if there's anything that I missed. Without further ado, let's go into this Excel spreadsheet. If this is your first time seeing the spreadsheet, let me just explain to you how this works. Over on the left side over here, we have all the gospel accounts, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, compiled together in a rough chronological format. Different scholars have done this different ways. This is simply how I have organized my own based on comparing a bunch of different ones and also just my own studies of the gospels. And so if you go all the way down, I have got this thing fully color-coded based on what we've seen depicted in the show. And over here on the right, you can see the color key. You've got orange referencing the Christmas specials, right? You've got green referencing season 1, gold references season 2, blue references season 3, purple is season 4, and then pink is season 5, and you'll have to come back to the next video to see what season 6 is going to be. But today what we're going to do is we are going to look at the events of season 5 right here and see whether or not I was accurate in my predictions. In the previous video, whenever I predicted things, I put everything I was predicting in light pink, and then today we're going to change it into dark pink, whether or not it was actually in the show. Also, if you look over here to the right, you will see that there is another section here, which is additional to the show, where I basically have broken down when all the 12 apostles were first introduced and called by Jesus, right? And so we'll have to look at that a little bit as well. And then down here, we've got Old Testament flashbacks and New Testament flash forwards that we're also going to be looking at today. And so let's actually start over here, right? Let me see if I can zoom in a little bit. And, okay. Let me go over here. And we're going to look right here at the 12, right? So as you can see, we saw the introduction and calling of most of these apostles in season 1, right? Simon Peter, Andrew, Big James, John, Matthew, Thomas, Little James, Thaddeus, they were all introduced in season 1, and we either saw their calling or a reference to their calling in season 1 as well. The only ones who were saved for season 2 were Philip, Nathaniel, Simon the Zealot, and Judas Iscariot. However, prior to season 5, I did predict that we were going to see the callings of both Little James and Thaddeus depicted in the show, and now I can confirm that that is actually the case. We can turn these right here into some pink because we saw the calling of Little James in season 5, episode 7, and we saw the calling of Thaddeus in season 5, episode 8. Technically, I guess we didn't see Little James's calling in episode 7, but we got to see the conversation that led to it, and so I'm going to count it, right? And then we go down, and let's look at Old Testament flashbacks. I predicted that we were going to see both a depiction of the first Passover event in this season, and also possible references to David, Absalom, and Ahithophel from 2 Samuel chapter 17, but unfortunately, I've got to delete both of these because they did not show up in the show, which is a bit unfortunate for me, even though you might have to tune back in for my, what was I going to say? Oh, you might have to tune back in for my season 6 predictions because I might put those back on there because I'm really wanting them to depict that stuff, but we'll see if it happens or not, right? So we actually didn't have any Old Testament flashbacks in this season, but we did have one New Testament flash forward. I did not predict that, but we did see Thaddeus ministering in the future. We don't know when that was, and so I really just have to say not applicable when it comes to a passage. But this was in season 5, episode 8, and it didn't really tell us when this was in the timeline, so I really can't say. And so for right now, I will simply put it like this, put this like this, and I need to change the font because that's really going to bother me. This is Allegria font. Sorry if this is taking a little bit longer and if it's a little more boring for y'all. But yeah, so I don't know exactly when this would be. even though I would suggest that he looked a little bit younger than Mary Magdalene did in the in that flash forward with Matthew and him. So I'll put it right there in between, right? I don't know what year that was supposed to take place, but we did see basically whenever Jesus was talking to Thaddeus, we saw a flash forward to Thaddeus ministering to people in the future, right? And so again, we don't know when that is, but I'm just going to assume that it's somewhere between what we saw in the messengers and what we saw in season 4, episode 7 with Mary and Matthew. All right, now let's go over here to the actual gospel harmony and let's see what we have. So one thing that you'll notice is that there are times where I just like to have fun with it, and I just like to predict things we might see in the show that don't actually, like, I really have no reason to think that. I'm just kind of taking a shot in the dark. And it turns out that many of these I was just totally wrong, right? So Simeon and Anna, that was not in the show. I don't know why I even predicted that. I'd probably have to go revisit the video, and so we can go skip over that. Satan tempting Jesus, also not in the show. That was more just wishful thinking. I was hoping it would be there, but it unfortunately was not. Christ cleansing the temple, though, this was in the show. And, this is really going to test my knowledge here. I believe it was it was season 5, episodes 2 and 3. I colored that wrong. Correct me if I'm wrong. If I'm wrong with any of these, just correct me because I'm not looking at what episodes they were. I'm just kind of going to go off memory here. But yeah, so what they did in the show, there are some speculations people have where, not speculations, theories or debates, I guess. People debate whether or not Jesus cleansed the temple once or twice, right? And that's because whenever you look at the Gospels of Matthew, Mark, and Luke, they depict Jesus as cleansing the temple at the end of his ministry. But the Gospel of John depicts him as cleansing the temple at the beginning of his ministry. And one could argue that maybe they just aren't speaking purely chronological, because there are times where the authors of the Gospel favor like thematic things over strict chronology. But whenever you actually look at the cleansings themselves in those gospel accounts, there are enough differences that might suggest to us that they were two separate events. However, there are ways to kind of combine them together to where it works. And so in the show, just for the sake of, I guess, just budget and also the way that things worked out, they did combine them into one singular event, and they put that at the end of Christ's ministry. And so even though this gospel harmony right here has it depicted earlier on, we can scroll down all the way down here, and we can confirm that he did cleanse the temple right here, 5/02 to 03, and I can change that right now. However, we are going to scroll back up a little bit, and we are going to edit things as we go. All right, so basically what we're going to do here is we're just going to scroll down, and we're going to see where we find some pink. So birth of Jesus and John the Baptist, we don't have anything there. Young Jesus, we didn't see anything there in this season. Jesus' ministry, like early Jesus' ministry, like the baptism and stuff, we didn't see any of that. We did see a flashback. Wait, hold up. I'm remembering this now. John the Baptist preparing the way. This was depicted in season 5, episode 7, because we had a flashback featuring Philip and Andrew. And so that was depicting some of the events that we do see in Matthew, Mark, and Luke right there. So we do see this right there in the show, which is cool. But we did not see the baptism of Jesus. We did not see Satan tempting Jesus. And then we really didn't see any of these events. Like many of these events that are still in white here, we're probably not going to see them. Those are just events that the show chose not to depict. And so now we're just scrolling down looking for some pink. And we're not going to find some for a while. And I believe some of these earlier ones were just ones that I was hoping would show up here. I am really surprised. So we didn't see any of this stuff right here. I'm just trying to make sure that we didn't. We didn't see any of this stuff here. And I will say, I am very surprised that we did not see the woman caught in adultery in The Chosen. That to me seems like there's this whole debate about whether or not that story actually belongs in the Bible. But to me, that seems like a story that is just like the perfect example of like what The Chosen was created to depict, right? Because I like if I was just like writing an episode of The Chosen in my mind, you could easily form this episode that revolves around this woman and explains how she ended up in that moment. And she is, she's an adulterous woman. She's not doing something good. But then you could also explain who the guy is in this situation and why he isn't being dragged forward. And I'm just really surprised that they didn't do that. I'm assuming it was more just limitations to where they were trying to get to, and probably limitations on time, because to me, they had to have wrestled through the idea of at least depicting this. But we didn't see any of this depicted in the show, which really did shock me. And so we scroll down. We don't see any more pink here. Scrolling. None of that was depicted. I'm just trying to look to make sure that we didn't see anything. The parable of the fig tree. I have to look this up. I don't remember. Let me see if I have a Bible anywhere nearby. Just one second. Let me flip through this. All right. I just want to flip over to Luke chapter 13 real quick, because I know we did get reference to a parable of the fig tree, but I don't remember if it's that one that it's referring to right there. Let's see. Luke chapter 13, verses 6 through 9. And he told this parable. A man had a fig tree planted in his vineyard, and he came seeking fruit and found none. And he said to the vine dresser, "Look, for 3 years now I have come seeking fruit on the fig tree, and I found none. Cut it down." No, we did not see that one depicted in the show. Whenever he curses the fig tree, there's one teaching that Jesus references, but I'm pretty sure that the reference that he's making there is actually from the Olivet Discourse later on. We did talk about this in the Is It Biblical stuff. I just can't remember the stuff off the top of my head. I was wanting to confirm that that is not what that was. And so we continue on downwards. No pink. Right here. Jesus receives the children, the rich young ruler, the rich in the kingdom of heaven. Again, I was fully expecting for us to see this, because the rich young ruler story to me is another story that just seems like it was almost put in the Bible for something such as The Chosen, right? Like, it just seems like that would be something that they would naturally gravitate towards. And if this were one of the earlier seasons, I could almost imagine them dedicating, again, an entire episode to telling the story. But I think what we really saw in this season of the show is that they were very constrained by the timeline, right? To where they really needed to fit this into 1 week, and therefore we didn't really get as much flexibility in each episode as we have seen in other seasons, right? In other seasons, it felt like they had more room to breathe, whereas I think for seasons 5 and 6, we're going to see it's going to feel a lot more narrow. I think probably in season 6, they're going to have more room to breathe, just because they've got 8 episodes to depict less than 24 hours of time, in which case I think they'll be able to do more fun stuff with that, whereas I think they felt very limited in this season. I don't know. I haven't talked to the writers about it, but that's how I would feel. And so unfortunately, we did not get to see this. I thought that Matthias might end up being the rich young ruler, but turns out he was Matthias. So we scroll down. We did see the triumphal and tragic entry into Jerusalem. I like to call it the tragic entry, because to me, it was more tragic than it was triumphal. Jesus weeping over Jerusalem, we saw that as well. We did not see Jesus returning to Bethany, however, because they decided to have Jesus stay in Jerusalem. He did return to Bethany a few episodes later, but that was not depicted in the show. It wasn't at the same time. Jesus cursing the fig tree. Oh, this is going to bother me. What episode did he curse the fig tree? Is that season 5, episode 5? This is where I'm going to need y'all's help, and y'all need to correct me if I'm wrong. I believe it's season 5, episode 5. It's either 5 or 6, but I genuinely can't recall. Let me think. So episode 5 is the one that I believe ends with Nicodemus's arrival. In which case they're staying in Bethany, in which case he cursed the fig tree on the way there. Yes. So I think it's season 5, episode 5. But I can't recall. So if I am wrong there, just correct me. Greeks seeking to speak to Jesus, that was depicted. That was in season 5, episode 2. Because that, it auto-filled there. Because we actually have some of our friends from the Decapolis. They come and they are talking with Andrew and Philip, and it's not a direct adaptation of the scene from Scripture, but it is at least the reference there. And you will see that I didn't predict that they would include the next scene in the show. This is where Jesus says, "What shall I say? Father, save me from this hour? No, Father, I came for this hour. Glorify yourself." And then God responds from heaven and says, "I have glorified my name and I will glorify it again." And I didn't expect them to depict that in the show, mainly because, that's usually a little bit more on the supernatural side of things than the show typically likes to depict. They'll depict miracles and stuff like that, but it's such a difficult miracle to capture. I didn't expect it to happen, right? Like where God literally speaks from heaven, but they did it really well. And we got to see that, except we actually saw that in season 5, episode 1. And so they kind of move the chronology around a little bit here. And I would actually argue that that's probably a little bit of a problem, because in scripture, the reason why Jesus responds the way he does is specifically because he hears that Greeks are looking for him. And that's because in the Gospel of John, the whole context is that the fact that the Greeks are seeking him whenever the Jews have rejected him would suggest that the time of the Gentiles is upon them, right? It's the idea that his hour of suffering has come. And so in the context of the show, it's a little bit different, but they kind of flubbed the chronology a little bit there, but that's okay. Why many people did not believe Jesus to be the Christ? I guess we could say that we saw that in the subsequent stuff, because we see people debating about Jesus over the course of the next several episodes. So I'll just say 5/01 to 02. It's not like a perfect adaptation, but sure. Let's see. Did we see this? John chapter 12, verses 42 through 50. Let me see. Let me flip open. Again, I'm sorry if y'all are having to just sit here and watch me while I'm flipping here, but y'all can be flipping with me. Why not? John chapter 12, verses 42 through 50. Let's see. Nevertheless, even the authorities fear the Pharisees. Whoever believes in me believes not in me, but in him who sent me, and whoever sees me sees who sent me. I don't think that we saw that in the show. I don't think they depicted that part. I think they cut the scene short. But again, if I'm wrong with any of this, correct me, because that's where I need y'all here. Jesus teaching in the temple daily. They kind of depicted this. They really only had Jesus teaching one more day after this, because they had him teaching in 5/02 and in 5/03. So I don't know. Jesus returning to Bethany. We did eventually see him return to Bethany, but it was not on this day. So I will have to turn that into no depiction there, because they had Jesus spending the night in Jerusalem. Let's see. Jesus teaching about the fig tree now withered. They have that happen in season 5, episode 6, I believe, because that is the day afterwards. And so you can see how the chronology is a little bit off here, because they've moved the days around a little bit, but that's okay. The authority of Jesus question, the parable of the two sons, the parable of the wicked vine dresser. We did see this. I believe this is in season 5, episode, I want to say 3, mainly because this is when this is the scene that they actually act out. But the authority of Jesus being questioned, if this is the event I am thinking about, we did see this depicted. Sometimes these titles themselves aren't telling me what they are. By what authority? Yes. This is where he responds and he says, "Tell me about John the Baptist." And they're like, "Oh, we don't want to tell you about John the Baptist because we're afraid of the people." And he says, "Okay, well, then neither will I tell you." The parable of the two sons, we did not see that one. It's interesting though. I'm pretty sure that we did see this in a previous episode of the show though. Maybe y'all can help me out here. This one right here. So let me just actually read the verses to y'all, because I can't recall off the top of my head where we saw this, but I believe it was depicted. Basically, Jesus says this: "What do you think? A man had 2 sons, and he went to the first and said, 'Son, go and work in the vineyard today.' And he answered, 'I will not.' But afterward he changed his mind and went. And he went to the other son and said the same. And he answered, 'I go, sir,' but did not go. Which of the 2 did the will of his father?' And they said, 'The first.' Jesus said to him, 'Truly, truly, I say to you, the tax collectors and the prostitutes go into the kingdom of God before you. For John came to you in the way of righteousness, and you did not believe him, but the tax collectors and the prostitutes believed in him. And when you saw it, you did not afterward change your minds and believe him.'" I don't think that was depicted in season 5, episode 3. It could have been. Like, I could picture it in my head, but off the top of my head, I don't remember, and so I might need y'all's help there. Even though I do know that later on in the season, you do have like the religious leaders walking with like Ananias and stuff like that, and they're talking about Jesus teaching there, because they reference how Jesus says that the tax collectors and prostitutes go into the kingdom of heaven before them. And so I know that there is a reference to this in the show, but off the top of my head, I don't remember where it is. And so for right now, I'll leave it blank, and I'm going to rely on y'all in the comments to just go and correct me. The priest and the scribe seeking to arrest Jesus. This is just in verses 45-46. It says, "When the chief priests and the Pharisees heard his parables, they perceived that he was speaking about them. And although they were seeking to arrest him, they feared the crowds because they held him to be a prophet." We do see this depicted in the show throughout the whole season, because they're constantly afraid of Jesus there. I think things start taking a turn for the worse in episodes 4 and 5. Because keep in mind, we're talking, it's the priests and the scribes though. Let me say episodes 3 through 5. Because that's where we really see things like stepping up. because the priests would be the Sadducees, the scribes would be the Pharisees. And so we do really see things begin to step up there. Render to Caesar what is Caesar's. We do see that in season 5, episode 3. And so I can mark that as being there. Marriage and the resurrection. This was not depicted in the show proper. However, it was referenced, I want to say, in season 5, episode 4. Remember, there's this one scene where I believe it's Gadara, and he is talking to Caiaphas, and he mentions that Jesus, like this whole interaction happened, where basically the Sadducees came to Jesus and talked about the resurrection and like marriage and stuff, and Jesus gave a response. We didn't see that scene depicted in the show, but Gadara does reference it. And so, while it wasn't depicted, it was at least referenced, so I'll just put that over there to the right. The 2 greatest commandments, we did see this depicted in the show. That was in season 5, episode 3, so let me just copy and paste that. Oh no, I just scrolled up, my bad. And then, one scene that I'm surprised they didn't depict is this one. How David can call the Messiah both the Lord and his son. It really surprised me that they did not depict this in the show, mainly because in the context of scripture, it's like the final death blow that Jesus deals to them, where he basically like says, hey, y'all have been testing me, let me test y'all now. But they just didn't depict it in the show, which is weird. I didn't think that they were going to depict the woes to the scribes and the Pharisees in the show, but they did. The reason I didn't think they were going to do that is because they did something very similar back in season 4, episode 3, right before Rama was killed. But in the show, they ended up doing it. And so, actually, I'm realizing, I think my chronology is my chronology right here? Yes, no, yeah, this is season 5, episode 3. I'm trying to remember what happens in each episode. But I wasn't expecting them to depict this because it's very similar, but instead, Jesus, like in the scene, he says, I said similar things to you back in Capernaum, but I'm going to say it to you again, which I think is really cool. Jesus lamenting over Jerusalem. We did see that depicted in the show, which is cool. I'm surprised again that they did not depict the widow's mite thing. This is basically where Jesus is in the temple and he sees a woman, like a widow, putting like a penny worth of money into the offering plate, and he like starts like weeping because he's like, well, this means more to God than all the big like the tithes of like the rich people. I'm surprised they didn't include that, but they didn't. Let's see. Jesus and his disciples leave the temple. We saw that. Christ predicting the destruction of Jerusalem. We saw that. So we basically saw all of this. It was kind of a truncated version of it, but we did at least see it. And so I can say that this happened in season 5, episode 3 for all of these. And just so y'all know, the reason why I make these is because I'm hoping these videos will be useful to you, because to me, I like The Chosen, but my main goal in watching The Chosen is ultimately to point people back to Scripture, and I want to point people back to Scripture because I want to point people to God, right? And the reason why I make these videos is because while The Chosen is a beautiful piece of art, it's important for us to realize it is chiefly a work of art. And therefore, we should always be comparing it to Scripture and stuff. That's why I do my Is It Biblical series. That's why I do stuff like this, because I want you to see the things that they're depicting so you can go and read it for yourself and figure out, oh, okay, this is the passage. Let me see what they added, what they changed, and stuff like that. I think that's probably the healthiest, most sober-minded way to approach the show. The parable of the fig tree. This is what I was referring to earlier. This was depicted in the show, but it was not depicted at this moment. Instead, it was depicted during the whole fig tree incident, which I think was in season 5, episode 5. Is that what I put earlier? When we were talking about the fig tree. I put it... Oh, season 5, episode 6. Yeah, that's right, because it was whenever they were returning from cursing the fig tree. All right. And again, if I'm getting these episodes wrong, just let me know in the comments, because I don't remember the numbers off the top of my head. Christ warns the disciples to be watchful. The faithful... Let me go look at that real quick. Matthew chapter 24, verses 36 to 44. So some of the stuff in the Olivet Discourse, they did just like skip over. But in general, they did depict it. So this one they did depict. This is where Jesus says, like, nobody knows the day or hour except the Son. Except the Father. And so that one they did depict, but they didn't depict these parables. And so that one we can remove. All right. The parable of the talents. This one. Okay. So this one, I guess they kind of did depict it, because this is the one where, like, during season 5, episode 3, Jesus begins to tell the parable, but he continually gets cut off. And so, they kind of depicted it, but I'll just say in season 5, episode 3, they did that because, like, Barnaby is like, when are you going to be able to finish it? I think that's the parable that he was telling there. I could be wrong, so again, correct me in the comments. The plot to kill Jesus, yeah, we we see that quite a bit throughout the show. Let me see specifically. It says, when Jesus had finished all these things, he said to his disciples, you know that after 2 days the Passover is coming, the Son of Man will be delivered to be crucified. And then the chief priests and the elders and the people gathered in the place of the high priest, whose name was Caiaphas, and plotted together in order to arrest by stealth and kill him. So they did change it a little bit because they don't show the elders gathering. Well, I guess they do. They actually do show the elders gathering at Caiaphas' place, because that's the scene where you have Ananias in them. It's just, I guess in my head, I picture more of them. But so the plot to kill Jesus and stuff, that would be season 5, episode 6, I believe. Could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure that's correct. Jesus leaving the city each night, again, they do not depict that in the show. They depict him leaving the city one night, and that doesn't count to me. Jesus teaching in the temple again, they do not depict that in the show, because they have him leaving for good. Judas betraying Jesus for 30 pieces of silver. I want to say that is at the end of season 5, episode 6. Is that correct? I think. Because episode 7 ends with them all arriving at the Last Supper. Episode 6 ends with Mary Magdalene being apprehended by Matthias and Judas going to betray Jesus. So technically this is 5 by 06 and 07, because he arrives at Caiaphas' house at the end of episode 6, and then he actually agrees to betray Jesus at the beginning of episode 7. The disciples preparing for the Passover, that is in season 5, episode 7, and that was depicted in the show, which is cool. All right, we are getting near the end here. And then pretty much all of this, I'm not going to go through every single thing here, but oh man, this is going to be the hard part where I'm going to need y'all's help. Honestly, I'm just going to leave this hovering on this one screen right here so y'all could really help me out, because we're going to have to go through and I'm going to have to figure out pretty much all of this is depicted in the show. I'm just not going to remember which part, because the way that they did the Last Supper was that, it's all out of order and stuff. And so filling out what episode each of these was in, that's going to take me a little bit longer time. The good thing is that if you want to really help me out, you can go to my, one of the previous videos that I uploaded, and it just says The Chosen's Complete Last Supper, and I edited the entire Last Supper into chronological order, and I broke down all the biblical stuff, but the issue is that they did it extremely out of order, and so I couldn't tell you exactly what all order this stuff happened, even though I can say at the very least that this part is in season 5, episode 8, actually 7 and 8, because episode 7 ends with the 12 arriving at the Last Supper, and episode 8 begins with Jesus arriving at the Last Supper as well, and then they leave, right? And then whenever you get to all the rest of this stuff, it is all just throughout the season, so it'll be a mixture of seasons 5, episodes 1 through 7, and so if y'all want to look at this, just let me know in the comments down below, or I guess I'll just have to go through by myself and do it, but I basically just need to know what episode each of these things happened in. I think that the eating of the unleavened bread and stuff, let me just guess. I'm pretty sure that eating of the unleavened bread and drinking of the wine was season 5, episode 6, because the foot washing came before that. And so that would have been in season 5, episode 7, right? Because some of this was in chronological order. And so that stuff happens there. The disciples disputing about who will be the greatest. Was that in season 5, episode 7? I guess it was, because it led to the foot washing, right? I don't know. I could be wrong. The Christ identifies as betrayer and Judas leaves. I believe that's in season 5, episode 6 as well. Even though, hold up. I'm trying to think here. Y'all are having to process this with me. I'm trying to remember if Judas left in the same episode that they ate the bread. Because if they're working backwards in time, they had them eating the bread and the wine, and Judas was present for that, and he left afterwards. Was that in the same episode? I'm assuming it was. but since they're moving backwards in time, he could have. This is gonna bother me. I think that he was still here, so I think that's season 5, episode 5. I could be wrong, but again, if y'all just want to go through and like look at these, y'all can help me out. They did, so I know that they have them leaving the upper room in season 5, episode 8, and that's because they did mess with the chronology just a tad, because technically the events of John chapters 15 through 17, those all took place after they left the Last Supper, and it was probably while they were walking to the Garden of Gethsemane, whereas in the show they depict all of this as being during the Garden of Gethsemane itself. However, we don't see the full high priestly prayer. I do know that for a fact. We only see part of it, and that's in season 5, episode 1, near the very end there. And John like sees Jesus praying that and stuff. So I know that part, but all the stuff in between, I'm going to need y'all's help with, or I'll just go do it myself later. But yeah, so we do have the entire Last Supper. That's kind of what the whole season revolves around. We do not see the end of the high priestly prayer. We only see the very beginning of it. And then we do see Jesus coming to Gethsemane to pray. We see him taking Peter, James, and John with him. He prays for hours. The betrayer approaches. And just like I thought, it kind of ends right there, even though I had different ideas of exactly how it would end. I thought maybe it would just end with, the fire coming in the distance. And if it didn't end like that, I thought that maybe it would end with like the disciples fleeing. But they actually ended with the kiss, which to me was kind of an awkward thing. I don't know if they changed this. I remember when we were in theaters watching the show, whenever Judas leaned in and kissed Jesus, it was like, mwah! And like, it was kind of funny, and it kind of ruined the mood a little bit to where I was like, oh, this is a really heavy moment, and it made me laugh. And whenever I rewatched it on Amazon Prime, it seemed like the kiss was a lot quieter. I don't know if they changed that or if maybe just Amazon settings were different or something like that. Or maybe it's because I wasn't in theater. But it seems like they did deafen the kiss a little bit to make it a little bit less awkward. Because to me, I will admit, whenever I watched it in the show, I was like, that was kind of weird. And so, yeah, that is basically it. We obviously haven't seen any of the other stuff. But we will come back next video on this channel. The next video on this channel will be my predictions video for season 6. Obviously, a lot of this will be very easy to predict because I can guarantee you we're probably going to see the crucifixion of Jesus. But The Chosen always likes to do some special things there, and so we will theorize about some other special things they might do, whether there will be flashbacks to earlier in Jesus' ministry, or whether there will be Old Testament flashbacks, New Testament flash forwards. We'll talk about all that in the next video. But until then, my name is David Tate. This is Now Let's Be Honest. Be sure to keep a smile on your face. Don't let anybody steal your joy. And remember who you are. I will see y'all later.